Welcome to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock, who is the co-founder of videosocials.net and of videointerviewpodcast.com. In every episode, Mark interviews business and organizational thought leaders who share their stories of how they inspire others by making a difference. You can find this show on videosocials.net and YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and almost any podcast platform of your choosing.
Welcome. And I am really pleased today. I've got Matt Levenhagen, and Matt is a seasoned entrepreneur and the driving force behind unified web design. He has over 2 decades of experience in generating revenue and building businesses on the web. Matt offers a wealth of knowledge in the web design, agency management, team development, and process optimization. More on that later. And the host of the Builders podcast, which I've seen several episodes of. Wonderful to have you, Matt, and nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So, as we were speaking a little bit before we started recording, I ended up kind of getting sucked in and watching several of your podcasts. Joel Solomon, who was a guest on your show, had recommended you to be on mine. Joel's a longtime client and friend, and very unique story and individual.
Yes, he is.
And I didn't bring you on because you're a website designer. I brought you on because I really like your philosophy, and I really like the way that you approach business and clients and managing people, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we could get a little bit of, look, we're all inspired to do something in this world and to make a difference in some way, shape, or form. And so I would love to take a few minutes and just kind of find out, what was your path and what inspired you to be who you are, and for the world.
For the world, yes. Well, I will keep it as short as possible.
Okay.
there's a lot there, but yeah. Well, and I go back a few decades. Yeah. So I think, thinking about where I've landed today and why I do what I do, it really goes back decades. It goes back even to the 90s. I'm gonna kind of age myself here. In the early 90s, I actually tried to be an artist. I was pursuing art for the first half of that decade, bartending on the side to pay the bills, and but I had that kind of creative spirit, and that was my first business. I was doing artwork, commission work, did some shows, and but then of course I was a struggling artist, and I sort of got out of that eventually and decided I wanted to make money. So I went back to school for business, and then that actually led me to landing a job in the insurance industry. I did that for like a decade as an insurance agent. I partnered in an agency and more business. Had my own little agency for a while. I was actually in a contracting business for a few years. I had MPR remodeling, Matt's Painting and Repair. And then I discovered the internet, and this was the early 2000s now.
Uh-huh.
And I always loved computers, and it just was kind of this thing that I got passionate about. I'm like, what? Because I like computers, but also I like the idea of people making money online or making a living online and stuff. And I kind of ended up going down that path. But I found that path by putting up a website in 2003. I had my little insurance agency, and I had a business card, and I'm like, if I had a web address on there, that would make me look even more professional, like I'm really legit, And so I just put up a little website. I think it was, I got the domain from register.com. That was a thing back then. It was like $30 a year or something. I remember it was really expensive. And I put up that website, and great. Awesome. That was a little experience right there. I like the tech side. But then I was looking for other things to sell, and dentalplans.com. I I wanted to sell dental plans, and I went to dentalplans.com, and I was used to actually working with a rep, doing all the paperwork, all this stuff. And I was going to have this process to just sell dental plans like normal insurance. But the guy gave me a link, and it was an affiliate link. And that affiliate link, I guess if I put that on my website and somebody clicks it and they buy, I get a commission. I'm like, where's the paper? What do I have to do? Like, nothing. You just put the link on your website. And I got long story short, a couple of months later, I get a check in the mail for $40 where somebody bought through my link. I probably referred that person to my website or whatever at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the spark when I got excited about the possibilities online. And I ended up taking that. I ended up getting into, it's a long story. I got into affiliate marketing, pay-per-click advertising, SEO, ended up creating my own digital products, my own memberships. That was the next decade. And but through all that, after getting beat up by Google for years and the stresses of that whole line of work, at about 2012, I was pretty burned out. I was at a point where I had to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of did an assessment of my life and what I enjoyed doing. And I just loved the tech. I wanted to still do stuff online. But one of the things I realized that I really enjoyed doing was building the websites.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, I built sites for myself. I built niche sites. I did niche marketing. I did all this stuff for myself. I'm like, what if I did that for other people? I like doing it. Sometimes I would even like it more than the actual marketing and advertising I was doing. I would sit all day tinkering with the website, get it just right, So I started doing some freelancing, and for a few years I did that. Then I landed a job for a corporation for like 4 years as a web developer, and then I came out of that, and I started my agency more than 5 years ago. Now we're in our 6th year. But through that, I think what is kind of the thread here is that I always gravitated to wanting to do something that I was passionate. I started with my passion. What do I want to do?
Right.
And then try to build a life around that. And I would get excited about something and I would go after it. I would put everything, all my energy, burn all my bridges to try to do that thing. And it worked out. And this is what I'm doing today. As I'm still doing, I learned more about web design, more about web development, figured out my craft, and then decided I wanted to build something bigger. And I started building a team with the agency and stuff. But I love it. I love showing up and sitting at this desk every day at 8:30 a.m. roughly. So that's it in a nutshell.
And as always is the case, I see parallels, between you and myself, both very, very extensive technical background. But the parallel that hasn't been drawn yet is that both of us came from technology, but now we're all about people.
Yeah.
Right. So it's because whatever we're doing with technology, it's meaningless if it's not serving people. Right. So, that being said, you now have an international team. We have international clients, but we don't have an international team. We are all US based as far as our team. How do you manage and maintain the collaboration, the communications, the processes that need to be developed and followed, and obviously project management from a standpoint of every client's going to be a new project, et cetera. But how do you manage all the nuts and bolts and put together all those nuts and bolts and processes so that it's a positive impact and completion of a project that is going to give your clients the experience that they want to have?
Yeah. And 100%, it is at the end of the day, everything you do, the teams you build, the process you build, all that's to serve your clients or your customers. And also every step, every piece of that has to be quality, right? Like you have to have, the end result is quality. And that's how you also retain, because that's how, clients want to keep you, and they want to do more with you, and that's the same with partners. Yeah. So it's for me, it's an evolution, right? It's in what, you might start out with some documentation for yourself. So when I started my agency, it was really just me, and I knew developers, so I would outsource, case by case, when I had a project and needed somebody on. So that's how I kind of started. I just would I need help with this project, get somebody for a couple months to help, and then they're gone. But even in the beginning, like a lot of it starts with thinking about everything from, am I going to repeat this, right? I just did this thing. Am I going to do it again in the future? I might not. I might tomorrow. I might, in 3 years. But let's document it. So that's documentation has been a huge part of the development of my agency, what we do as a team. But it started with me. It just started with me, like, if there's a process I did or something I did with a website or the tools I use, just documenting everything, the plugin that I use in this case, or and so that's kind of how it started. Also thinking about every project from, the steps in that project, right? Like a full web design and development project there's a lot of pieces there. There's from discovery down to the design part, creating mock-ups, wireframes, mock-ups, to actually translating that design to testing, all that stuff. So I was always naturally like, I'm gonna create that process up front and then work my way through it. So I don't think about it. This is the next step. This is the next step. The next step. It's part of what helps there too, is you don't have to think about it. You're not worried about it because you know what the next step is. You just look at your document. So that's where it starts. And then as I start adding team members, that's kind of, you start building documentation around them, processes around them, depending on what their role is. So, and part of it is also the tools you use. So for example, I'll use a couple examples. So, my first hire, was a front-end web developer, Krista. And Krista, her whole job was actually to translate designs to Bootstrap. Now, not even WordPress. Like WordPress is our biggest thing, but I've had a Bootstrap developer on my team for the last 3+ years. And that happened because I got a client that they do a lot of promotions, and they do a lot of funnels and landing pages, sales pages, all that stuff. And so they needed somebody that could help in that department and be a dedicated resource. Well, it was, the first thing is, okay, well, how are they going to communicate?
Right.
And we landed on Slack. We use Slack. This other company uses Slack. And then how is she going to be plugged into that process? Because I wanted her to be as autonomous and as self-managing as possible. So we have at the time we actually started with Trello, but now we use ClickUp. But so we would have a board on Trello. So Trello is your project management software, right? So you have a board dedicated to that particular company. She would, and every client and every partner is different. Some have their own project management system. Some like to use email. Some like to use, this particular case, they like to use Slack. So they would drop a project in Slack, and she was in there and could communicate directly with them. And that's important. Not every case do you want your developers communicating with the client, but she was a good communicator. So that we could check that box off. and she would pick up the project, create her own little, card in Trello, and get it done, deliver it. And in the beginning, I was more involved in that process. So when I first started her out, she picked it up pretty quick, but the first month I was more involved with it. I was obviously checking her work before we sent it off to the client, but we kept refining that process, and I kept, tuning it until she was kind of doing her own thing, and I could just sit back, and then she would only pull me in if there was maybe some design or something she needed, or something that she needed input on. But I got it to a point where the process just worked, and it was based on having this process documented, her knowing how to communicate, the client knowing how we're communicating, and then how that's tracked, with developers like her. I get daily reports, like what they did, what they're blocked on, if they're having any issues, what they're working on. So I know every day I can do I do this for all my team now. They drop it in Slack. They just give me what they did, link it out to the tasks, so I could get a real high level bird's eye view of what everyone's doing every day. Or if I have something specific I know someone's working on, I can check on it real quick. But that's how that evolved, and it's the same way with my VA that helps me with marketing. It was just kind of the same thing. I knew in the beginning what I needed to solve. I needed to get more stuff off of Matt's plate so he could focus on the important things. But it was just a matter of plugging her in, and what is she going to do, and trying her, testing her in various, she ended up doing something almost completely different than what she set out to do in this particular one I'm thinking of. Where originally she was just going to be a general VA. She runs everything, and on the marketing, content side of things. So podcasts, all that. But again, it was documenting. What is she doing? What is her process every day? When she gets up, we have a very specific process. But when I wake up in the morning at about 9:30, I get a Slack notification that says, Matt, ClickUp's ready. And I know where to go in ClickUp. And she's got a card in there with all the content for the day that she's put together, the graphics, the content. I review it. I have a way in there. I mark it. It's good to go. Or if I have to edit something or change something or what I have to do, I approve it all. I hit done. And then she takes that and goes. And that's all a process. It's like a well-oiled machine. So that's what I try to do in every aspect of my teams, my business. I know what people are doing. I don't micromanage. They kind of help. I try to help them, so they can kind of manage themselves. And I facilitate just the client. I have a project manager too. She will take, client requests and stuff. But so we take that and we get it assigned and handle it. So all the things we're doing is, that's really where it lands. It's just, in the beginning, it's just, you don't know specifically. It's individual to the role and to the person, but you work on that. That's got to be a priority up front.
Right. Right. And I've always felt like too, I think it was Collins, Good to Great. One of the many books that I've read on leadership, get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. Right. So
yeah.
Another, my personal philosophies is hire for character, develop skill. When you're doing technical work, they have to, they got to come to the table with, with the technical chops to get it done. But, do they have the commitment and the passion and the communication skills? And, if they've got that, then, we've at numerous times brought people in to do a certain role or a certain task and found out, well, we really like them, but it doesn't seem to be a great fit for that. And they keep leaning over towards this other thing that we also need help with. And so, then we'll move them there and bring somebody else in to do the other. I'd much rather retask or repurpose or, help people get into the right seat, as long as it's the right person on the bus, right? So,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah,
that's
it's important to be that flexible, because you hire somebody, you do all your upfront due diligence, and
Mhm.
you kind of their skill assessment of what they're going to do. But once they're in the job, you might have to fine tune it, or like you said, maybe move them
Yeah,
into a completely different scenario. Maybe something they discover along the way, they're like, you discover that they're really good at it, or they're really passionate about it.
right.
Like the VA that I had hired for just more admin work ends up doing marketing and content, because at one point I'm like, she's really good at that. She needs to just be doing that. And she wanted to, she was thinking the same thing. It's like, I really enjoy this. So it was an exploration for her to find that place. And yeah, having that flexibility is, yeah, super important, I think.
Yeah,
So
we're self-sponsored, but this really kind of brings up a story in the development of our second major service. Our first service is phoneblogger.net, and that just came from the standpoint is we couldn't drag content out of clients. We're talking 15 years ago that we started PhoneBlogger, and
yeah.
um, people get all wrapped up in their perfectionism and trying to edit as they write and trying to proof as they write, and it would take them hours and hours to write something. It would take 3 to 5 minutes to read, and then what do they do with it, right? So we just call them, interview them, 10 minutes on the phone, ask them a couple questions, record it, transcribe it, professionally edit that, and turn it into a blog article, and then get it out to their social media platforms, et cetera, et cetera. They're the
Great idea.
authors. So
Yeah.
one of our primary editors in that, Jackie, when we decided to launch Video Socials, which was about getting video content out of clients so that they put them on YouTube, get them on the social. Video obviously is taken over, and where do you get the experience? Where do you get the practice, the knowledge of that? And although she was a great editor, she really turns out she had some event planning and event management background. And, so we were putting together these groups of meetings, our Video Socials members, where we get together on Zoom, typically 5 to 10 of us, and we take turns recording our 2 or 3 minute, video blog posts, and now shorts and reels and things like that. And it's an experiential program, and we learn from each other, and we get feedback to each other, and it's supportive, and it's encouraging, and it's a safe place. This is the big one. Lots of people, like 99% of the world's population, have some anxiety about being on camera, right? So how do you get over that? You get over it in a safe environment through practicing doing it, right? So, and it's right. So that was the foundation of Video Socials, and Jackie was just an example of, she's now moved on, had a really lifetime opportunity and took that, but was really instrumental in helping us understand that these were events that we were running, and et cetera. So help put that together, and then we decided to start messing around with podcasting, and Vikram Rajan, my business partner, started doing a podcast, and then he talked me into doing a podcast, and I didn't want to do it. I'm an introvert to begin with. It's hard enough for me to get on video to begin with, and and then we had clients that are like, we want to do podcasts too. Where do we start? So we invented videointerviewpodcast.com, and we handle all the logistics, gathering the guests, getting them booked, gathering their information, all the way through to the production, post-production, and getting it out on social media, et cetera, so that they don't have to deal with all that. They in theory, they just show up and record, but of course, as as a podcaster yourself, you need to know your guest. You need to you do some research on them. You need to realize that and know why you're doing it too, right? So, but anyway, so I offer for anybody, if you're wanting to get on video, or you've been struggling with it, really don't know where to start, or you're doing it, but you're not able to do it consistently, or you're still feeling uncomfortable because you're talking to this inanimate object called a camera, come as a guest to Video Socials. There's no cost, there's no obligations. Videosocials.net. Just click the guest tab at the top of the screen. But the other thing that kind of stood out for me when I was looking at your online presence is your tagline is helping others do better, and I found that very compelling. And so I wanted to ask, how do you implement that philosophy, through daily operations, and what kind of impact does that have on your team and your clients?
Yeah, so so with the agency, and just like probably any business, you kind of like, until you start doing it, sometimes you don't know what people need or the problems that are out there, the pains that people have, right? You have an idea. Like when I had started my agency, I had this idea. I'm like, I'm going to build websites, right? That was pretty much it. I like building websites. I'm going to go build some websites. But through that experience and working with clients, but it's particularly like other agencies. So we do partnerships with other agencies to help them in various ways, to provide our services to them and their clients and so forth. But as I was having conversations with other agency owners, or maybe not even just agency owners, but where they had all these issues with like getting work done, basically, right? They had all these nightmare stories they'd share with me about this developer they used in this country over here that, and they dropped the ball, or never finished it, or they did a terrible job, or they couldn't communicate well with them because of time zones and all these issues that they would have. And you're one of those.
Been there, done that. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And so after hearing that a few times, and I realized, with my background, having built teams and worked with international teams, and this isn't my first time actually. When I was doing internet marketing years ago, I did outsourced to like Philippines and stuff, and to help me with niche sites. So I had that experience. I'm like, and I, got a Scrum. I, was a Scrum master for a little while. I let that kind of go, but I still have that background, a project management background. I have, all the skill sets, right? I'm like, I think I can solve this for people. I think this is something I could. Number one, I see it as a problem. Number one, I'm passionate about, like, I want to solve this for people, like, I think if I can identify something that people are having a problem with, and I can be the one that helps them do better in that regard, I think that's great, because it's going to help that client, that partner, solve that problem and that stress, because everything creates stress, right? Like, especially that, those situations. And essentially help them extend their team, and I would be set it up in a way where they don't have to worry about how it gets done, right? They don't have to worry about dealing with that person over there and in some other country or some other time zone or whatever. They're just dealing with me or my project manager. Like, I have a single point of contact. We get it done for you. So that was kind of the catalyst that kind of, like, I can help them do better in that regard, help them do better in terms of, and it kind of, there's all kinds of ways we can help people do better, right? There's even in just getting organized. I've had clients, even direct clients, where they're a complete mess when they show up at my door. They don't know where their hosting is, what a domain is. They don't know anything about, like, their most valuable asset in the world is like a complete disaster. They're on a terrible server. So that's another thing. Let me help you. Number one, fix your immediate problems, but then do better in the future. Let's get all that organized. So that you own your stuff, that some random employee that's no longer with you didn't, like, set up your hosting and now it's lost. So all those fundamental things.
Tell you how many times.
So it's that, and then it bleeds into the agency as well, right? And helping my team do better by giving them the tools they need and the support they need to get the
Mhm.
job done and to do their communication. So yeah, that's really that philosophy that I try to build into everything.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So we could go on with war stories on that, because I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, we started out with practice marketing advisors, and so we were advising client. Well, quickly, everything's got to go through the website. It's got to go to the website. So, this is exactly what we ran into. And I had an extensive technical background, but no web experience, no development experience. But I knew that things needed to be documented. They needed to have access to things. They needed to own their own stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So in the process of just trying to deal with all the one-off developers, right, because they could spell it on a business card, I ended up doing a bunch of sites for clients, and it was fun to figure out. It was very challenging, but we've moved on from that. We still have a few clients that we're still hosting for, but it's
But it's crazy though. It's not just small. Well, I mean, it's not like micro businesses. These are like established businesses that sometimes,
absolutely,
and I
absolutely.
end up being like, part of my role is being a sleuth, going out and trying to figure out what they got, where the server is. They might even know I had a host one time that they were on the server for so long it no longer was attached to a web plan,
Mm-hmm.
and so the people at the host didn't even know like what this VPS over here was doing,
Right.
and it's like things like that. But it could be somebody that they're super successful. They got the vision. They're out there. They're selling. They're doing it. They're making money, but their tech is like out of date. So yeah, that's how we help people do better. Do better.
So
Be organized.
moving beyond the what all of us in technical fields have run into, that small to up to mid-size, like kind of companies that they just don't understand how foundational it is, and how you've got to know, because sooner or later you're going to want to make a change. You've got to start nowadays. You've got to be paying attention to security, and very serious attention to security, because malware, hacking, and ransomware, and everything else. We've got a client, Sean O'Rourke, who's in cyber liability insurance, and his videos just scare the bejesus out. And like he says, you can't. It's not a matter of just being. If you're going to have a cyber event of some sort, it's a matter of when, and whether or not you're prepared for it, whether you've done your due diligence to protect yourself from it, and move on. I digress, though. In the development and security world, and want to come back to that famous word, process. Effective process and communication is the key to any successful project. It's the key to any successful client engagement, frankly. And I know that this is important for you, but what strategies do you guys use, with unified web design, to make sure that you're able to execute these projects, effectively, and keep the clients happy in the process?
Yeah, security is really, really important. It's not something, especially small businesses, somebody just starting out is not going to be thinking about. I mean,
Right.
but it becomes more critical as time goes on, and as your business develops. But we have it all depends. So like, depends on the type of project we're doing. We do full website builds and just design development, and then it's off, and they do whatever they do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But we do manage sites, and we do manage projects from the development of it to maintaining it, and sometimes we're saving things, that we will get something that has been hacked. I have a lot of war stories around fighting hackers, and, they found some exploit somewhere. We do with a lot of WordPress. We do other things too. We do some Shopify and other frameworks and things, but WordPress is a big chunk of our business because was Matt's wheelhouse for years, and it's just a natural thing we get. But especially in WordPress, security is a huge has to be a huge focus, or thought about in some realm. And again, a lot of business owners don't. They just think their website's up there, it's fine. It looks good, but behind the scenes, things are getting out of date. And like I said, your business might grow. Today, it might be fine, but with WordPress, plugins, the theme, core, all that becomes out of date over time. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a project. The project is they haven't updated their site in 2, 3, 4 years.
Right.
And now it's a whole thing, right? If you had kept it up to date that whole time, you're good. You might have little bugs, along the way, but now when you are, that far out behind, now you have to really work to get everything back in shape, everything updated and tested, and you're going to have major issues probably. But so it's getting somebody, first of all, when we take something on, we're going to do an audit. We're going to look at the site, how it was built, what the issues are. Maybe it's the code, maybe it's the plugins. Sometimes do they have like 100 plugins? You shouldn't have 100 plugins. There's no scenario. There's no scenario.
Been there, done that too. And plugin incompatibilities and version incompatibilities, and
overlaps,
and the plugins that you chose aren't being kept up with. Don't have a strong developer force behind them, so they aren't keeping up with the WordPress updates. And it's a menagerie.
You have an ecosystem of like 60,000 plugins out there. And there's good and bad ones, and developers that come and go, there's a lot of overlap. There could be so many things that can happen in that scenario. So it's taking an audit of that. Like, do you even need these? It's very easy. So the WordPress is great. It's awesome because it is easy to self-manage. It's also, then it's easy to just install a plugin for this little issue or this little feature you need. You install a whole plugin, and then you don't need it anymore, and then it's still there. No one removes it. There's no process. So what we can get to here is, once we get things stabilized and everything's in good shape, or before, even when you first build a site, have a process to update that site, to visit that site on a regular basis. There's some things that can automate, help you automate that, but you should have, everything starts with a backup. I always have like regular backups. There's plugins that can back up your site on a regular schedule, once a week, or it depends on how often you're updating content. Every scenario is different. But that's the first thing is backup, and then making sure that if don't have it auto updates, which are some scenarios where you shouldn't have auto updates, critical plugins. That's a whole conversation. But you should at least be going in there at least once a month. Just go in there, update your stuff, because what happens with plugins is, there's a lot, because WordPress is so popular, there's a lot of, people out there that are looking to hack your site. And they'll find exploits. And it could be one out of those 50, 100 plugins you have, one of them is not keeping their code up to date, and there's some exploit there, and they're hacking into that. Once a hacker's embedded into your file system, they're not easy to, even with malware, even if there's malware tools on your server, it doesn't catch everything. They're so smart. I've had to really dig through to extract some of them. But it's having those routines. It's really all about routines. It's about, now, of course, as an agency, if we take on somebody, we're even going to have a QA process where there's a lot. You can go, there's scenarios where you're just going to update, we call production the live site, right? You don't have maybe the team or the resources to have a fuller process, but at least you're going in there and updating, backing up, updating, backing up, updating. But you can get even more detailed though, because there's clients we have where we have a staging. We do everything in staging, update there first, test it, because they might have an e-commerce site that has a lot of revenue. There's sales coming in every hour, and so we have to be very careful in those how we do that. And we have a QA process where we check it, test it after we. You can get really, really deep with that, but
Right.
At the end of the day, bottom line, the lesson here is don't ignore it.
Don't ignore it. Exactly. Have a process and be able to communicate back and forth and bringing that out into the world of people is have an accountability partner. Right. So, and I can only imagine that for when you have ongoing engagements with clients, you're kind of their accountability partner and they're yours. Right. So, there's money changing hands. There's people on staff, there's et cetera. And you got a job to do. You got a process that you're following. You're reporting back to them. You're keeping them apprised of what's going on, and things run a whole lot smoother and a whole lot better when you're able to run your business and not have to deal with, oh, that's right, I haven't backed up this week, I got to get in and do my backup, I got to go do my plugins. Even if you can figure it out, I say it's it's not worth doing it yourself. Get somebody.
It's even challenging for the developers sometimes. This is what we do. So that's what part of the do better is. You can go out and you can do market sales, whatever, create products, do all the things you do. And if you have a team behind you though, then you don't have to worry. The stress is gone. You don't have to worry about it. It's just getting done. And it's really important for us, because we know we're helping that client keep their website up. They're not having any problems with the website, maybe period, hopefully. And it's running smoothly. But the challenge I had to do this recently is I had to make sure things were running so smoothly that they don't forget about us. They don't even forget why it's running smoothly. So that's why communication is important. I had like somebody left a company and there was some change of hands, some changes in the company. And I had to re-explain to the new CEO what we did to emphasize the reason why you guys aren't having problems anymore is because we're here. So yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's all about helping people, keep their business up and running, at the end of the day.
Pay attention to pay attention to what they don't normally pay attention to, or don't think they need to pay that close of attention to. It's like you take the car in for an oil change, at certain intervals, or for the routine maintenance, and rotate the tires, et cetera, and because you're leasing the car, you're only going to have it for a couple of years. You're just going to follow whatever the manufacturer says to do, and that's what they think of when they think of maintenance, right? So, and websites are not that. Websites are not that. It's not something built in a factory that is repetitively built over and over and over again, and it's static, and it's not. You got hackers that are trying to get into the dang thing. It's on the internet. It's on the internet, right?
Yeah, it's not like I remember. It was 20. I mean, again, age, but 20 years ago, I remember I actually fought the idea of going to WordPress. I've been using WordPress since way back then, because we used to build our sites just static HTML files. So no one could really hack those, right? Not really. I mean, they could hack the server, but as soon as you introduced the database, it became this whole thing. But yeah, we got over it. We just got to have the routines, processes, keep it up to date.
Yeah. Got it. Well, my friend, we are out of time, but I did want to take a moment to say that your website's unifiedwebdesign.com. You're on LinkedIn. Levenhagen. You're, as well as you have a business. By the way, folks, we're going to have links to all of this associated with the podcast. You don't have to memorize any of this. I do encourage people to check out your podcast, which is at The Builders FM. It's a really cool podcast. And it's not all about web development. It's about people and process and you've done some recently on AI that I'm actually looking forward to checking out, because especially using AI in business process, etc. So you're on Facebook at Levenhagen. You're on Twitter at Matt Levenhagen, et cetera. Basically,
I'm all over the place.
We'll put all the links below. And Matt, I wish we had more time, but I do so appreciate you coming on. It's really great to meet you. We have a lot of parallel experiences that we could explore in the future. But
thanks for having me, Mark.
You're very welcome. I wish you continued success, and folks do check out the Builders podcast. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock. Your positive comments, likes, and most importantly, your sharing of this show with others is greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to the Inspiring Business Podcast on whatever platform you prefer. You can catch prior episodes on videosocials.net and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the major podcast platforms.